Welcome to the show, Real Estate Matters. I'm your host, Brett Furman, and for 35 years, I've been helping the community write their real estate success story as broker and owner of RE/MAX Classic. Today, joining us via Zoom during the COVID-19 pandemic is special guest Matt Luce. Matt is the owner of Abadusky Environmental, and today we'll be talking about septic systems. So thanks for joining us, Matt. I'd like to welcome you. So I've been doing this 35 years, and I've had the pleasure of seeing Matt multiple times in multiple situations regarding septic. And the one question that comes up, Matt, every single time is, I flush my toilets and everything looks fine. There's nothing in the ground. I don't have any problems. Yet I just failed my septic system. Panic sets in, and all hell breaks loose. You have your car, and if something goes wrong with your car, a light comes on. Or if you're not feeling well, usually you have a temperature or a fever. But the septic systems don't work like that. What gives with all that, Matt?
Yeah, that's true, Brett. And there are some cases where the system, somebody's septic system, they know they're having an issue with it. Okay. So they know that either it's not worked as it should, perhaps there's some surfacing on the ground, a little bit of ponding. So there are cases where, yes, people do know that they have an issue with it, and thus they're not really caught by surprise. The problem that we see mostly, and it is fairly common, is that people have never had an issue with the system. Okay, so it's worked for them. They've had no backing up. They've had no surfacing on the ground. The system has worked for them just fine. So this catches them completely by surprise. And really the reason is because there is a significant difference between the system working well for the homeowner as presently constituted and how well the system has to be working for a real estate transaction. Okay, I mean, a lot of cases you're in a house, you've got one or two people in there, maybe you've got a family of 4 or 5 moving in, and the critical thing to remember is that the system has to be able to handle the flows for what we would consider to be maximum occupancy in the household. Okay, and handle them well. Not just a case of, it's not surfacing, it's not backing up. That was a standard 40 plus years ago in the old days. Now, it used to be they come out on real estate deal 40 plus years ago, put some dye in the toilet, flush it. If it didn't show up in the yard, you were good to go.
That was me. I'm an old timer.
You're an old timer, right? You remember that's the way it was. Now today it's a whole different ball game. Everything is very invasive. They're getting down inside the tank with cameras. They're getting down into the absorption area. And you're right. The majority of the people have not had an issue, but they just have to keep in mind when selling a house that the system has to be working as well. I mean, almost as well as it was when it was installed, as far as it has to be able to handle those same amount of flows in order to get that inspection and to get that approved. And you have to remember that all systems have an end life. They are not designed when they are installed to last forever. Okay, that's one of the benefits of having the systems today. They treat the wastewater well before it gets to the water table. That's the job there. Take out as many, as much of the bacteria, harmful things as possible. The downside to that is that they will not last forever. Okay, they are not designed to last forever. And you've got to think then, okay, if I started here and it's say designed to last 25, 30, 35 years, somewhere along that pathway, I'm going to get to a point where I'm not doing as well as I should be. And it means that, look, if you weren't selling, continue on, carry on. You don't do anything until you have a problem. You sell, that system has to be in tip-top shape.
So then, Matt, I guess that brings up a question that people always ask me as well is, what's the age? Is it, sometimes I've tested these homes in Gladwin that are, 1950s homes. And the thing passed with flying colors. Like, is it that they built things better if they were older, or is it just, it doesn't really matter? Once the age sets in and you get to a certain lifeline, the systems are going to fail or not meet the standards of the health authority?
Yeah, basically, like in the state of Pennsylvania, 1960s and before, some of the 1960s and late 60s and before, a lot of what went in were seepage pits, cesspools.
Cesspool.
Okay.
Yep, that's
Now,
what I'm
the
talking
seepage
about.
pit or cesspool was designed, obviously, to work as well as possible for as long as possible. It was not designed with the groundwater quality and remediation of the wastewater in mind. It was basically get rid of the waste as well as possible. So, with good soil, a lot of times these were 10, 12, 14 feet deep. A lot of times they were down into open rock channels. The wastewater
Okay.
just went away. So you still get
Okay.
in some areas in nice soil, Brett, where they still drain out. Okay. Now, they still work. They work fine. So in that case, they will not fail a certification based upon the fact that it is not ideal for the groundwater, but they will pass it because they're still working well. Now, starting in the 1960s in the state of Pennsylvania, they came out and said, look, we want to find a system that is, first of all, going to work based upon the soils present, but also do a better job of remediating the wastewater before it ends up in the water table, which is being pulled back up by wells and even public water in a lot of communities and so on. So in short, systems went from they don't last as long. Today, there's no way to put an exact figure on it, but looking at it, that 25, 30 years, 20, 35, sometimes 40. I mean, some of them still, and so much depends upon usage. Okay. There is no magic bullet there. If I sit there and I only have one or two people using that system, it's going to last a long, long time. Okay. It could last well beyond that. If I'm in there and I have, 6 kids and then some of them come back and I'm never really getting down below 5, 6, it will tend to work less time. And, and there's a number of other factors that go into it. Sometimes the soil is very marginal. Sometimes, it drains better. Sometimes not. There's quality of construction, workmanship, making the right calls to begin with that factor into it as well. So there's a number of factors that go into it. But in short, we have traded off a little bit of longevity for better groundwater quality.
So it's the health. It's really gets into the quality is more important than anything in this thing. So who is the regulatory body, if you will? I have a house. I'm just picking. Say I have a house in Villanova and it has a septic system, and now I need to sell the house. So what kind of are the steps, and who's the regulatory body that's going to oversee that process?
Yeah. So say, for instance, you're going to sell your house. You're going to put it on the market. You haven't had any problems with the system, let's assume. If you have had problems with the system, Brett, that's where I say get it taken care of before even listing it. Now, what I like to see is if you're going to sell the house, I like to see, and we're increasingly see it, getting the septic certification done prior to listing the house. Okay. That's kind of the trend is moving in that direction. And that's even if you've never had a problem with it. And I don't care if it's only 5 years old. It's better off to get the inspection done at that time, because if there are problems, as you know, Brett, it can take months to get them rectified. And when a buyer comes in, they have the inspection done a little bit later, maybe settlement's 2, 3, 4 weeks away, 6 weeks away. The time isn't there. A lot of times we lose them. Now, for the certification, you want to get in a PSMA certified inspector to do the inspection prior to listing it to see where you're at. Then if you're good, you did that, disclose that, put it on the table. I've got a good passing certification, PSMA certified. Now, if there are issues, then that's where everything gets handled, the issues rectified and so on, along with the local agency. The township, the state DEP, they don't get involved in theory, just in simple real estate transactions and the inspection process. Like this. Now, some townships are going over to a management plan where they want people or have people do inspections every 2 or 3, 5 years on their system, make sure things are fine. But in general, for real estate, it's a case of, get the inspection done. We have no involvement by any, third-party government, local agency at this point. Then if we have issues, then we go toward rectifying them. In the case of, in Montgomery County, everything is handled Montgomery County Health Department, Chester County Health Department, same as in Bucks County. Now you get into Delaware County, Lancaster, Berks. Those are handled individually by the township. Each township is different. They have a separate inspector, separate fees. but similar ways of going about rectifying the situation. That's a set standard put forth by the Pennsylvania DEP.
So what about in this process? Do you get any longevity of system if you do more pumping of the sediment? Is that something you recommend to people, or is it something that, you know what, leave it alone and just deal with it when you have a problem?
Yeah, and that's one of the big changes too that's kind of taken place is awareness and education as far as servicing the septic system and pumping the septic system out, getting the tank pumped out. It used to be forever that you got the tank pumped out when you had a problem, when it was over full, backing up, surfacing. But that's really, by then you're too late, okay? The system is, I mean, it could be a broken pipe, but in all likelihood, the system is on its way out. At that point, we're in just full damage control and just trying to mitigate a mess. So instead, if you think of a septic tank, the way a septic system works, and you have a septic tank, in that tank, you have all your solids, grease, soap, scum, everything else comes into that tank. And the idea is that, the solids settle down, the grease and scum kind of gets up to the top. And then right in the middle, we have as much room as possible to take the water through and have that mechanism happen. Because at the end of the day, we only want the waste water moving on, okay? Just water. In an ideal world, it would be 100% water. We would not have any solids, any particles moving through, no soap, grease, scum. Okay. And so when people don't pump the tank down, what happens is the solids build up, the scum layer basically drops down, and we shrink the layer. So instead of having 24-hour time to kind of push through the tanks and settle out, we shorten that by, it can be a great factor. There are times where you have just several inches in there and you're pushing everything right through. So what we've done, a lot of townships are on board with it. We encourage people in the industry, the business, and people are getting better with this, is that, every 1 to 3 years, we like to see the tanks pumped out, pumped, cleaned, inspected. It's also a time for inspection. There are components inside the tank that if they fail, if they deteriorate off and so on, we are now no longer working as it was intended. If you never service the tank, never pump the tank, you will not see the deterioration. You will not ever know that there is a problem, and it will never get fixed. So in general, 1 to 3 years, I like the 2-year mark to get it done. And for families of 4 more, I like annually. It's a good investment. It is less expensive in general than public sewer. Okay, to get that pumped out annually for an average household, maybe you're $250, and it's money well spent. It is, in fact, it is, along with making sure you don't put things in that should not be there, one of the best things you can go ahead and do.
And the garbage disposal, I assume, then the garbage disposal rule still enforced, meaning you don't like to see a garbage disposal in a system with a septic. I look at it like, and systems are better today. Okay, so starting maybe 20 years ago, roughly, they came out and said we're going to require 2 tanks, 2 septic tanks, or 1 dual compartment tank in there, so that we have a couple sets of baffles. It does a better job of holding everything in the tank, so it is better. Garbage disposal in an ideal world, we wouldn't use one. Obviously, the reality is that it's become something that many people find to be, something that they need. Now with 2 tanks, a little bit less concerned with it than used to be with 1 tank. A lot of times for homes that we know we're going to have it, we'll put a commercial grade filter, effluent filter on as well. Which then gets changed out, cleaned out. It gets cleaned out every time it gets serviced. So there are things, but also, obviously products that do not biodegrade should not go down the toilet. Things like that. Grease. We have people that cook heavy with grease, and that should not obviously go down into the drain. Too much bleach. We don't like to see also too much bleach. It actually then harms the good bacteria that break down waste inside the tank. So there's a number of things you can do, but as far as the maintenance on that, the best thing is just to get on a service schedule, stick to that, and somewhere in that 1 to 3 years is where we want to be with that. So what happens in the case, and I've had this happen a bunch of times where, and I've seen it kind of change maybe, where we have a house and the folks are in the home and say they move to a retirement home, and then the house goes vacant, and now they decide they're going to sell it and the family gets involved, and now we need to test the system. What's the protocol and how does that work with this load test? Because I get a lot of pushback because they say, well, it consumes a lot of water and I don't want to have to pay for all this water and it's a couple days. And I never heard of this thing. Like, why are we doing this now? And 10 years ago, I never heard about this load
Yeah.
test. Is this a trend that we need to know about?
Yeah, the load test is becoming more common. It's done for a number of different reasons. Number one, like you said, Brett, we would have these homes that would sit on the market, and before the load test came into being, you could excavate down to the system, look in, kind of see what's been going on and so on. But the load test does afford you a way of saying, okay, well, let's go right to it. It's been vacant, so I can't sit here and just look in the system for liquid level. I don't really know what's going on, how long it's been vacant for. So it's a way to basically put that off the table, go right to it and say, okay, let's put it right to the test. And for a 3-bedroom house, it has to handle 400 gallons of water per day in a 24-hour period. 5-bedroom, 600, 4-bedroom, 500. Put it right to it. And then okay, you can sit there, a couple-day process, input the water, and sometimes it comes right up and you'll start the process, put the water in. It doesn't take it right away. Liquid level rises up well beyond it should. You fail immediately. There are times where it takes most of it, but falls short, thus it fails. So that's become more common as a way to deal with homes that have been sitting vacant. And people don't like it because it's a lot of water. And like we said in the very beginning, Brett, the system has to be able to handle the same flows it did as far as, mathematically when it was installed. So it is a high test to clear. People don't want that's a lot of water. Obviously, if you're on a well, people don't want you taking that kind of water out. It's costly. You have to bring in water a lot of times. Now, the other times you see it more and more is when you say, okay, there's 1 or 2 people in a house, and there have been for some period of time. We know what the system is there. I have a family of 5 or 6, and I'm moving into that house. I'm not really comfortable with just the 1 or 2 people there. That's really indicative of how that system is going to operate. So you see more and more people then, looking to perform the hydraulic load test. In that case, when the occupancy is greater than what it is currently, the proposed occupancy is greater. So you have people that do that just because they want to be assured. And a lot of times the buyers will even be willing to, pay for that in some cases. Say, look, I'm moving in with a big family. I want to know it can take it. So you do the load test. And the load test does spell it out. It puts it right to it, pass, fail. And it is valuable, although obviously, like I said, it's got its caveats. It's more expensive. You have a water issue, and obviously a lot of sellers don't really like to see that done. But
So how would you know if you're a buyer that's going to be buying a home? And let's assume your family size now with COVID, all of a sudden now you've got, your college kids like me. I'm in the house right now and I have, all my kids. I got a boyfriend here. All of a sudden you had all this. I'm on public, so it's not an issue. But imagine that it was a septic system. Is it initially designed to is there like a standard where I could go to the township or figure out that this is designed for 4 bedrooms or it's a 6-bedroom?
Mm-hmm.
How would I get that information?
Well, I mean, in an ideal world, of course, people would have the paperwork from when their system was installed. Okay, in an ideal world. Now, there was a permit issued at one time. There was a design done testing, certainly for anything, 70s on. We see late 60s and forward. Okay. Obviously, you can imagine what happens to paperwork of that age. A lot of it, it's gone. Now we can do file lookup requests, especially some of the county health departments have fairly good record keeping. We can put in a request in there to try and pull paperwork based upon the address, the tax parcel, pull that paperwork. But a lot of times, even then, back from, somewhere in the 80s and back, it becomes kind of hit or miss, a little more difficult to find. And so, in general, you have to look at, since in the 70s and up, in general, if it was built for if it was a 3-bedroom, no additions have been put on, they kind of thought, okay, what if there were double occupancy here and you had 6 people in a 3-bedroom house, using 50 gallons of water a day. And so, 65 gallons of water a day. And so that's kind of how it is. No, that's peak. Okay. That's maximum. Obviously, with a system in general and with public sewer too, everyone should practice, water conservation. We like that period for a number of different reasons. Obviously, with a septic system, it becomes more critical just because it's not just gone in a pipe and it's gone down to the treatment plant, but we are having to get rid of it and treat that. And so we like, to see as much water conservation as possible. Things like, front loading washing machines. I think with septic systems are really a huge game changer there. We really encourage everyone to go over with a system to them. Showers. It's just something to be aware of more with a system than maybe you would with public. But as far as in buying it, you're right. Sometimes it is vague. There may be no paperwork. Maybe additions have been done with or without a permit. We've seen that, right, Brad? I mean, the InLaw Suite that maybe went in the basement. There was no permitting. It was never official. And that's why it's important, too, just to state that when purchasing a home, we especially see it this day and age with the InLaw Suite. Everyone's living longer, real estate, they're getting parents coming back in. You have a lot of that. So people will sit there and they'll list a house out as an in-law suite when they go to sell it. And sometimes it was legitimate. The process went through and they got permits and went to the health department or township. And sometimes it's legitimate. And there are other times where it was just done, without permits. It was never approved. The septic system is not designed to handle that. And so then we have big issues because the main thing I tell people, we're kind of straying a little bit, but the in-law suite in the state of Pennsylvania, the sewage flow is just given to that suite, which might just be a bedroom down in the basement with a little kitchenette and a bathroom. That is the equivalent of a 3-bedroom house. Okay. The flow is from a 3-bedroom house, just that in-law suite.
Wait, why is that? Why?
Yeah. Because they don't differentiate. The state DEP, townships, local agencies, they don't differentiate between that just being an in-law suite where mom and dad are going to come in, or mom or dad and come in and live, versus that all of a sudden turning into an apartment or something where I've now got 3 people. I've got bunk beds down there, two bunk beds. I've got 4 20-year-olds living there in college and really maximizing the flows. There is no difference. We've always said there should be a way to do it. Like I'll have a lot of people come to us and they'll say, but Matt, they're already living in my house. I just want some room, some space. In this state, as currently the way it is, in order to get that, first of all, again, it's considered a separate 3-bedroom dwelling. You actually have to go through the state because it is considered a second dwelling on the lot. Go through the state planning modules, the additional cost of that, the approval. And then typically what will happen is that unit will get its own septic system. And then we also need to find a place for a replacement system for the main house. So it takes, first of all, time. Maybe it takes up to 9 months to a year, 6 to 12 months. And obviously significant cost too, and testing and so on. And so that's a big thing we see now. And I see the in-law suite is, first of all, was it legitimate? Did they go through the process to begin with? Do we have paper documentation to show that the current system was sized to handle that? Or we have the system. Is everything on the up and up? And that goes to the township level too, as far as building code and so on. That's another important thing. But for septic in general, it's just a little bit more difficult. You have to jump through, and people do. We have a couple going on now, and that's fine. We just have to be aware when purchasing that make sure everything is on the up and up. Make sure it is legitimate, because otherwise that could come back.
Okay.
All of a sudden, township says, okay, it's not legitimate.
So tell me a little bit about the unfortunate case of somebody that does test the septic system and it just fails miserably. And it's a real estate transaction. Yeah. So the next buyer is going to want to have a working septic. The lender is going to want that. They don't want to own or have to foreclose to find out that there's no septic system. So what's the time that it takes to get that approved, engineered, and get it installed?
Yeah, gotcha. So in the event that obviously you're selling your house, and let's just say you weren't having problems, so you then had an inspection done, preferably before you list it, or you have it listed, the buyer comes in and gets an inspection done. As far as timing, there's always, no matter where it is, there's always some paperwork and a fee, okay, that will be paid to the local agency to commence the testing and design process, okay? That, can be gotten quickly. Anybody can get paperwork over there to the homeowner, instructions with a fee, drop it off, stick it in the mail, say that's a few days. Well, the next step, which really comes into being, is getting scheduled the dates for the soils testing, for the percolation testing to be done. It's basically a 2-day test. Soil test, dig down 7 feet, multiple probes, look at the soil horizons, find limiting zones, and then you have your percolation test. Now, there are times some townships, some times of the year, sometimes the economy's slower, where we can get those dates within maybe a week. I mean, I just got some last week that were like 3 days out, but that's the best you're ever going to find.
Wow.
In general, if you look at the average over the years and where that is, that's usually about 3 weeks out. Okay. So then you're out 3 weeks to get dates to come out and test.
Okay.
Now, once you test, then assuming you get passing results, assuming the weather is cooperative. If the weather is not, we get rain, snow, whatever it may be, and you've got to postpone. Well, now I'm out another, 1, 2 weeks. So that can really start to push out due to weather or scheduling issues. But suppose when we do get everything to pass, our best case scenario, then we have to design the system, a couple days, submit it back into the township, a couple days there, process it, get on a desk. And then the local agency has 7 working days to review it. Okay. So you're looking at, on average, roughly 4 weeks out a month to kind of know what is going to be done on the property.
Wow.
On average. Now, we've had times where it's 6 weeks out for scheduling. Sometimes it's better, but on average, let's call it 4. At that point in time, the system and the work can be, pricing can be gotten,
Okay.
estimates gotten, proposals. And then obviously, so the homeowner is going to want to do that, get pricing, look, give someone the go ahead to do the work. And then, of course, there's a schedule of getting that done, which is usually, 2-3 weeks out, somewhere in there. So at the end of the day, I tell most people that roughly 2 months. And if it's a whole system, the work is going to take a week to do it, a week to do the work. So really 2 months is kind of averaged out, where a lot of times it winds up falling from the time you commence that process. You can see why a lot of times when a buyer comes in, gets a search on fails, and they're like, well, we'll probably have it done in 2 months. And they were expecting to settle in 3 weeks.
Yeah,
4
that's
weeks.
a problem.
We've
That's
got a problem.
Big
Big
yes.
problem. And so a lot of times you've seen Brett, they walk. I mean, they're out.
Yeah. Which
Back
goes
on.
back to your original idea, which I think is just ingenious, is do the test before you're even thinking of selling.
Right.
I mean, what better idea, especially you have such a long window of time to get something correct.
Exactly. And then you get it done. Take the issue off the table. And then people say, well, I don't want to spend a few $100s to get a Tesla. Well, if that comes back bad and we blow a real estate deal up, a transaction, if you're in there for another week longer than what you want to be in there at, that money you've just spent a lot more than that in utility bills, mortgage payment, everything else.
Yes.
It's money that's well spent. It's highly advisable, and that's really what we're encouraging everyone to do.
And what do you see out there in the world of, if assuming the system fails, what's the, if you will, the cost benefit between if public sewer is available versus connecting to public versus keeping the system, or do you wait until maybe public sewer is going to become available, or do you have any idea when you might even see public sewer in certain municipalities, certain areas that followed? I just think you're never going to have it. That's
exactly correct. And that's true. I mean, this is what we say in general. If public sewer is available, and it's available readily, in general, we like to see people connect to the public sewer as a permanent solution. Connect to the public sewer, even if there is more expense involved, because it is a permanent solution. In theory, it should increase the value of the property, takes that issue off the table. Some people that are scared of septic systems, they've had prior issues. It takes that off the table. So we see that, and that's what we say. And I mean readily available. A lot of times, Brett, it's not readily available. It may even be nearby, but in order to get it, I need to get an easement across the neighbor's property. Maybe I need to go across the road, a busy road, to get it. Now I'm cutting into the road. There's a lot. You have to look at your tap-in fee. There's a lot of other things where it's not readily available. It's around, and it's worth exploring. But I will say the majority of time it will come back, and most people just don't want to grant an easement across their property for your sewer lateral. Half the time to get across the road, 2 or 3 days in the road work. That then becomes a case where it's not really worth it. Now, as far as if sewer is coming, there's been some subdivisions, areas over the years where it's always been in the works, okay? The problem areas where it's coming. Now, what I say is if the engineering is being done, and if that's the case, talk to the township. And if it's like in the home stretch, then I'm in the same mind that, look, try and get some kind of credit or something else there. Let's not put the system in, get by on it. And then when it is in there in 1 year, 2 years, use that money to connect to public sewer and do it that way. We've had a couple subdivisions, Echo Valley down in Goshen Road. There's been some like that where for several years there, we went ahead and that's the way we've handled it. But I will say, if someone says, yeah, well, someday there might be public, it's not coming within 10 years. Okay. Public sewer is one of those things that even when it starts, when they first start talking about it, until there are plans developed, financing, and it's done, until it's a done deal and it's just a matter of starting, there are places where it was going to be in there 20 years ago and they still talk about it. It's just not coming. You have to know that it is coming. It's just a matter of getting it scheduled and doing it. But that's how we generally look at it. If it's there are some lots where it's there. If it's there, we like it, take it. But it's just not always the case. And typically it is not. Everyone that says, well, public's going to be coming in 4 or 5 years. If it's not well underway, well, it's not coming in 4 or 5 years. It's just the reality of it.
But the other thing I've seen, and I had one not that long ago in Paoli that was a septic system, and they did opt to connect to public. My recollection was the actual tap fee, which I believe goes to the township, if I'm not mistaken. It was like in the several $1,000 category just for the privilege to connect the public system. Is those the kind of numbers we're talking about?
Yeah, it is.
4,000.
Correct. Yeah. Public sewer isn't cheap either. People think it's cheap. It's not this cheap. It's just that, septic system, average septic system cost today, average. Let's just say it's around $16,500. Okay. In the state of Pennsylvania, average. Now, your public sewer, that has cost as well. There's obviously, getting the effluent from point A to point B, doing that work, getting rid of the old tanks. And one of the big ones as well, which is always part of the equation of looking at it and exploring it, is the tap-in fee. Almost every agency, township, has a tap-in fee. And there are times when that's fairly reasonable. Like a few $1,000s is fairly reasonable. There are some townships in some places where it can be $10,000. There's some townships where they want you to put in like a double, duplex pump system, grinder pump system. Well, there alone, all of a sudden, you could be out, 12,000 in pumps, in package. And so then you've got to weigh the cost. It always becomes a weigh the cost kind of a thing. I say the best case is if you've got a sewer lateral that was stubbed into your property and is essentially waiting for you to connect. Anything, when you get other than that, half the time you're in the road, you're in the street. Easements, then cost-wise becomes prohibitive and even the feasibility of it becomes difficult.
Well, Matt, I'm very grateful to have you here today. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and especially to our guest, Matt Luce. Once again, I'm your host, Brett Furman. For more information with Matt, you could reach Matt on his website, www.abadusky.com. Do I have that right, Matt?
Correct. Yep, you got it, Brett.
And if you want any information from me or a copy of a free book I wrote, What You Really Need to Know About Selling Your Home, you can visit me on my website at www.brettfurman.com. Again, thanks everyone for being with us today, and stay safe out there.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Matt.
Take care.